Hello everyone and welcome to Atlaset if you're new. My name is Justina. Today we have a little bit different kind of video. Some of my subscribers were asking for me to make a video about prices and cost of living in Lithuania. So here it is. Just a little disclaimer before we start. I'm not an expert in this field and I'm only sharing the experience of myself, my friends, family and what I researched online and the news. Other people's lifestyle and experience can be different in the country, so their costs will be different too. Anyway, I will try my best to summarize here and tell more of the standard costs. When it comes to the cost of living in Lithuania, there is one major thing to take into account. There is the three largest cities in Lithuania, and then there is the rest of the country, with a few exceptions of some popular places like Palanga, Nida and Trakai. Prices and income differ quite a lot from these places to the rest of Lithuania. In this video I will focus to the capital Vilnius and Kaunas, since most of the people move in to live here. But of course there are some general things that are the same throughout the country, and we will talk about all of this. But first, let's talk about income. This one is definitely not the same all around the country, although the minimum salary is the same everywhere, which at the time of filming was 468 euros and 41 cents per month after taxes, or 5,620 per year. The average salary in Lithuania in the first quarter of 2021 was 966.5 euro after taxes, which is one of the lowest in the European Union, but so are the living costs. However, in the big cities there is a noticeable concentration of higher paying jobs. So for example, the salaries for programmers would be around 1,400 to 3,500 after taxes, which is one of the highest salaries in Lithuania, not counting the top-level management salaries, and they are concentrated in the bigger cities. The salaries in engineering, mechanics and many other industries are around 1,000 to 1,500 per month. Client service, food industry and sales, however, are one of the lower ones, and the salaries vary from 500 to 1,000 after taxes. Now let's talk about expenses. Of course, the biggest portion of the money will go for the housing. Just as the salaries are lower in Lithuania than the EU average, the housing costs are also one of the lowest in Europe. However, this is where it differs the most between the cities in Lithuania, Vilnius being the most expensive. Although it is very difficult to talk about this during the real estate boom in Lithuania, the prices are going up every day and people are buying like there is no tomorrow because of the fear of inflation. If we talk about real estate prices for both rent and buy, then there are three major categories. Buildings from Soviet times built outside the city center, built between 1950s and 1990, new buildings outside the city center and buildings in the city center, Old Town. The same price system applies to Kaunas too. The cheapest to buy or rent an apartment is in a Soviet building, where average buying price per square meter in Vilnius is from 1,300 to 1,600 euros, depending on how close it is to the city center. In Kaunas it costs around 1,000 euro. The price further decreases in other cities according to its size, except resorts. Then the second category is buying the newly built apartments outside the city center, costing around 1,900 to 2,500 euros per square meter in Vilnius, and in Kaunas around 1,200 to 1,500 euros. And the most expensive category is buying inside the city center and Old Town. There are both new and old buildings, some of which might be even older than 100 years old. The prices in the center and Old Town are anywhere between 3,500 to 6,000 euros per square meter, or even more for the most prestigious places. In Kaunas it is from 2,000 to 3,500 per square meter. For comparison, in Berlin, Germany, the price outside the city center on average is 4,000 euros per square meter, and in city center, 6,200 per square meter. And the rent is double, if not triple, than compared to Vilnius. By the way, when you're looking for an apartment or a house in Lithuania, you need to know that we count the rooms in the house or flat quite differently than most of the countries. For example, in an advertisement you might find something like 2 rooms apartment for rent. This doesn't mean that the place has 2 bedrooms. It literally means that the place has 2 rooms, except of a bathroom and maybe kitchen if it's not combined with a living room. So such apartment would be 1 bedroom, a living room, kitchen if it's not connected to the living room, and a bathroom. Now rent costs. First, let's talk about the rent in Soviet building apartments. Note that most of these buildings are not in the city center, but usually we have a good connection via public transportation. One room or a studio apartment costs around 300 euros in Vilnius, a little bit less in Kaunas. Two rooms apartment costs from 350 to 450 euros. In Kaunas, around 300 to 350. Three and more rooms cost from 400 euros, maybe a little bit cheaper in Kaunas. The apartments in more recently built houses are much more expensive to rent. One room apartment or a studio would cost around 400 in Vilnius, maybe a bit cheaper in Kaunas. Two rooms apartment costs from 450 in distant areas and 500, 600 or more in the city center in Vilnius. The same in Kaunas. Apartment of 3 rooms and more costs from 700 in distant areas. Meanwhile, in the city center, the prices start from 1,000, with very few exceptions are under 1,000. Kaunas is much cheaper, with prices around 600, and the city center around 700, with a few more luxurious options. What is the actual difference from living in a Soviet apartment building and a non-Soviet, you may ask? Well, there are upsides and downsides to both, but there are more downsides for Soviet buildings. The obvious reason being that the Soviet buildings are much older and we all need renovation from inside out. But you may get lucky to find a place in an already renovated building, when there would be not so many disadvantages related to heating and maintenance. In non-renovated buildings, heating can be very costly, as well as other maintenance costs, such as an old elevator maintenance. But for that there is a much lower rent cost. Although some newer buildings built in around 2000s may have bigger costs as well, because many of them already require some renovation. Also, general maintenance can cost more in newer buildings, because those buildings usually have fenced common yards and parking lots to take care of. Speaking of parking lots, if you're driving in Lithuania, then it could be quite a big disadvantage to rent an apartment in a Soviet building. There is barely any space for cars there, and many people park cars even on grass and pavement. And sometimes we cannot get out of there until others leave. The problem is universal around all the Soviet buildings in Lithuania, just because those buildings were built and designed in the mid-20th century, where the need of cars was much lower. But if you have no car, then renting a much cheaper Soviet apartment can be a big plus, because the public transportation generally is very well established in those areas. Also, for those who enjoy spacious areas, Soviet buildings usually have large green spaces in between, with plenty of playgrounds for kids. Newer buildings have much less space around them, just because there wasn't as much space in the first place in there. But the advantage is that most of them still manage to find space to build a small fenced yard and a parking lot. The apartment size in new buildings is reducing every year as well. If you want the most spacious apartment, then choose a building that is built in around 2000s. Maintenance costs can be hard to tell because every building and everybody's needs are different. One can find a lower costing place in a Soviet building and another can find a higher costing place in a newer building. I can give you a few examples of my own. My household is 3 persons. 2 years ago, I lived in an apartment of 65 square meters in a house built in 2000s with a fenced yard and a private garage in Vilnius. And the utilities used to cost around 100 per month and a little bit more in winter. Right now I'm living in a 100 square meter apartment in a very similar house and the utilities cost from 150 to 200 a month. A friend of mine with a family of 3 lives in a 70 square meter apartment in a Soviet building in Vilnius, and they pay every month at least 200 euros and more in winter. Another couple friend of mine who live in a Soviet apartment, they pay less than 100 each month and maybe an extra 70 to 90 euro in winter for heating. So you see the costs vary quite a lot. But let me show you some of more static prices and costs in Lithuania that you can compare with your own country. One more thing about heating prices in Lithuania. Usually the best prices are in the buildings that have gas heating or have heating that can be regulated inside the apartment. The most expensive heating is in old non-renovated Soviet buildings or electric heating. Okay, I hope I mentioned everything related to the housing costs in Lithuania. Let's move on to the grocery prices. Just as housing, the costs vary here quite a lot, depending on everybody's needs. But there are some specifics to talk about. There are only a few supermarket chains that cover most of the country, and they keep the prices the same everywhere. Maybe only farmers' markets can get cheaper than the store prices. Markets in general can be the cheapest place to shop for food. However, some of the markets positioning themselves as providing premium products, so they can raise the cost more than supermarkets. Here is the list of some food markets or turgus in Lithuanian that I know in Vilnius and Kaunas. However, if you talk about supermarkets, there are some that cost more and others cost less. For now, there are 5 major chains: Maxima, Rimi, Lidl, Norfa and IKEA. I noticed that when I shop in Rimi, I usually pay the most, and when I shop in Lidl, it is the least. But this is just my own experience. What really helps when shopping in a supermarket is having a discount card. Then, if you are shopping smart, you can save a lot of money. So for example, my family spends around 400 euros a month for groceries. We mostly buy fresh vegetables and fruits, more frozen in winter, nuts, cheese and chicken, beef, fish, but we avoid processed or country-specific foods like Asian and Mexican. Well, except of coconut milk, I cannot live without that. We also don't buy snacks like biscuits and chips. They are not only unhealthy, but they also raise the monthly cost quite a lot. I know people who spend much less than us. We can go buy a 200 a month for a family. Of course, all depends on eating habits and other possible food sources, which is popular here. Having farmers as friends, grandma's garden, or picking forest berries and mushrooms in the summer and autumn. By the way, tap water is good quality here, so you don't have to buy bottled water from the market to use at home. Also, vegetable prices depend a lot during the seasons. They cost a lot more in winter, since most of it is imported. Here are some approximate product prices that you can compare. Let's talk about the cost of eating out in restaurants. If you would like to compare Lithuanian prices with the Western European countries, then yes, of course, it is much cheaper here, even in the best of restaurants. But everyone has a different budget for eating out, and in Lithuania the prices differ a bit depending on where you eat. Generally, outside the big cities or touristic towns, the meals are cheaper. But if we talk about cities, then in most restaurants in Vilnius, you can find a meal for around 8 euros, mostly consisting of chicken, pork or vegetarian foods. Other meats and fish usually cost more than 10 euros. In high-end restaurants, meals cost from 20 to 30 euros. Well, except of steaks, they are on their own price league. A cup of coffee would cost you around 2 euros, and half a liter of beer would cost from 3 to 4 euros. Next, clothing. Here the situation is similar like everywhere. We have the same famous brands and the same stores like all around Europe. However, some Lithuanians notice that the prices are usually higher here than abroad for the same clothes, and discounts and sales are not as big. For that reason, many people choose to go to shop to other countries. I know people who do that, and even I bought once something from abroad that cost me 30% less than in Lithuania. Anyway, there are other options for shopping here. For those who want to save the most of money and are considerate for the environment, then shopping second-hand is a great option. There is a large network of stores around Lithuania, and many people enjoy shopping there. But if you would prefer something new, but still don't want to shop in the fast fashion stores, then there are many local clothing brand options. However, many of them are more costly than the fast fashion stores, but they are produced locally and usually have better quality. Next, let's talk about transportation costs. There are a few options inside the city. Public transportation is the cheapest way to go around. In Vilnius, a one-way 30-minute bus ticket is 65 cents, 60-minute trip 90 cents. In Kaunas it costs 1 euro. Monthly ticket in Vilnius costs 29 euro full price, and in Kaunas 28 euros. And students get 80% discount. If using a taxi or a car from car hire apps, then the trip from the city center to a mid-distance neighborhood would cost you around 5 to 7 euros. There also are city bikes and electric scooters for rent. In Vilnius, a city bike subscription for a month costs only 3.9 euro. One ride costs 50 cents. Electric scooter costs 50 cents plus 10 cents for every minute during the ride. If you have a car to go around, then here are the fuel prices, although we just keep rising recently. Petrol is around euro and 30 cents these days, and diesel costs around euro 20 cents. Traveling between cities is also easy by bus or train. The train is actually cheap here, unlike in other European countries. It's even cheaper than a bus and more comfortable and faster. A full price one-way ticket from Vilnius to Kaunas would cost 5.6 euro, while the bus costs 7 euros. But the bus is good for places where the train cannot reach. Let's talk about cost of entertainment and leisure in Lithuania. Probably the most popular things to mention here is cinema and gym costs. Though cinema doesn't provide much yet after the pandemic, but we are open. All foreign language movies in the cinema are shown in original language with Lithuanian subtitles. Cinema ticket costs around 7 euro and a half on weekends and evenings, and it's a little bit cheaper during the daytime. Gym membership costs vary from 19 to 60 euro per month, with most of them costing up to 30 euros. And if you don't want to pay at all, then use the outdoor sports equipment. You can find it in many parks all around Lithuania. For more culture, you can visit museums and galleries. They are generally quite cheap when compared to other European cities. Tickets rarely costing more than 6 euros, and there are student discounts too. There also is one day in a month that you can visit all museums for free, every last Sunday of the month. There are a lot of other free things in bigger cities. Quite often there are various free events, concerts and festivals, so it is not necessary to pay money to enjoy your time in Lithuania. Now let's move on to healthcare. Lithuania is one of those countries that have free healthcare if you have a mandatory health insurance. Everyone who is a student, parent, child, elderly or disabled gets free health insurance. The exception is students from abroad. If you are one of them, you have to obtain a private health insurance. For students from European Union, it's enough to get the European health insurance card. One large group of people I didn't mention are employees. They have their money for mandatory health insurance discounted from salary every month. So foreigners working in Lithuania don't have to worry about the insurance as well. Those who are unemployed and they are not registered at the employment service have to pay the mandatory insurance cost every month. The price in 2021 is 44 euros and 81 cents. Self-employed people have different rates according to their work fields. In general, health insurance is fine here, although it has one big disadvantage: long waiting lines for specialists. That's why those who can afford go to private clinics, but we still have to pay the mandatory insurance. Most doctors work both in governmental and private clinics, so you can get the same doctor consultation for free or for a fee. Doctor's consultation in a private clinic can cost from 60 to 100 euro. Many clinics have discounts if you have mandatory insurance and your family doctor wrote you a referral for specialist consultation. Anyway, with mandatory insurance, at least nobody has to worry if we need to get an ambulance or to give birth, which can be extremely expensive in other countries. Last but not least, let's talk about education costs in Lithuania. If you're watching this video because you're planning to study here, then you probably already know what are the prices of studies here. But just for a reference, the yearly tuition fee for most of studies is anywhere between 3,000 to 4,000 euros. Medicine costs around 11,000–12,000. But for example, the textbooks are usually provided by the university library and are not necessary to purchase. Let me know if you've learned it to be otherwise. Maybe the times have changed since I studied. Anyway, the students here get discounts almost everywhere with their student card, from public transportation, museum tickets, to restaurants and dental services. If you are a student in Lithuania, then go and check online the list of what discounts your student card can provide. If you talk about school education, it is generally free in Lithuania, but of course it is in Lithuanian language. Although there are some Russian and Polish schools as well. Kids who come to Lithuania and we don't know how to speak Lithuanian, we can go through an intensive language course and then join in the public school. Another option is attending a private school. Only very few public schools provide the International Baccalaureate program. If we talk about private schools, their prices vary very widely, but the ones that teach in English cost way more than in Lithuanian. Primary schools cost from 5,600 euros to 15,000 per year. Middle and high school costs from 8,000 to 18,500 a year. Kindergartens with English as a primary language cost from 5,000 to 10,000 per year. In Vilnius and Kaunas, the government provides €100 per month if a child attends a private kindergarten, which makes a discount of 1,200 per year. So I guess that's it. I don't know what else to mention, and this video has been a very long one. I hope that this information was useful for you. I tried to be as comprehensive as I could. If you currently live in Lithuania, please share some of your own insights about the cost of living in Lithuania in the comments below. Thanks for watching!